Hello, it's Alex, the Bookubus. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in December, and I ended up reading 7 books in total, and I had 1 DNF. So once December rolled around, I realised that I still had 7 books left on my 23 books to read in 2023 list. So yeah, 1 month left to read them all in, and with the page count total, I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I did still at least want to prioritise them, so I did mostly read those. I ended up at least picking up 5 of the 7, and then the other 2 I'm reading in January. So anyway, before I actually dove into those books though, the first book I read in December was Ghoul by Dillon Wylder. This is a short story collection. You might have heard of the YouTube channel The Cool Ghoul. I will leave a link below in case you haven't already seen any of his videos. But yeah, he contacted me recently to see if I would be interested in reading and reviewing his new short story collection. So he did send me a copy for review, but I had already read one of his short stories. It's one called Stine Must Die, and it was in the Lurking in the Dark anthology that came out last year, that Regina St. Clair put out. I also had a story in it, and yeah, his story in there was one of my favourites of that anthology, so I was very much looking forward to reading more of his stuff, and I very much enjoyed it. These are kind of short and quick reads. Some of them are a bit, you know, Twilight Zone style. Some of them had Goosebumps kind of vibes, but yeah, maybe more your Goosebumps for adults, I would say. But yeah, I enjoyed all of these. Some were dark, some were humorous. I really do enjoy his sense of humour in his writing, and all around it was just an entertaining time, and I rated this collection 4 stars. So then I made a start on the books left on my 23 and 23 list, and I started off with The Fisherman by John Langan. I have heard great things about this. I've seen so many people give it 5 stars, say that it absolutely blew them away, and yeah, that was obviously one of the reasons that I had wanted to pick this up, but I knew that this book was cosmic horror, which, you know, I enjoy some of that, but I also knew that it was related to grief, and the main character loses his wife, and the story goes from there. He turns to fishing, and yeah, I guess something happens while he's on a fishing expedition. So it was the grief side of things that had made me put this one off, because having dealt with my own experiences of grief throughout my life, and honestly, I just didn't want this to like set me off on some kind of, you know, spiral or anything. So that was the reason that I'd been putting it off, but it actually really didn't hit me in that kind of way at all. I mean, yes, it does touch on the topic of grief, but I didn't find it particularly affecting. And overall, this was a bit of a disappointment to me, because I had seen so many people rate this so highly and rave about it so much. I wanted to enjoy it to the same level, but I found this one to be incredibly slow. And I mean, I love a good slow burn of a story, that's not an issue for me, but this one, I just found it a real slog to get through. I wasn't really feeling compelled to pick it up. Basically, I just found the whole thing incredibly slow. It didn't really grab me too much at any point. I think on paper I liked the idea of the story overall, and I really do think it had some amazing imagery in here, so it did have some strong elements that I enjoyed, but unfortunately this one was just too slow for me to really, you know, get that immersed into it and really care about any of the characters. So overall I ended up giving this one a 3 stars. It wasn't a bad book, but there were just, yeah, some negative elements for me as well as some positive elements. So then I changed tactic a little, and I picked up Stone Dead by Jamison. This is a zebra horror title from the early 90s, so you kind of know what you're getting with that, although, yeah, to be fair, some are good and some are bad. This one I really enjoyed, actually. It is about a creepy doll, if you couldn't guess that from the cover art, which is incredible. And it's about a woman who is an actress, and she comes into possession of this doll, weird stuff starts happening. There's like a rival actress on the scene who ends up, you know, getting attacked. And yeah, anyway, our main character is having these weird dreams, and yeah, eventually 2 and 2 is put together and she realizes that the doll is doing something to yeah, kind of have all these attacks on various people throughout the book. And we also have some questionable love interests. She is married, she has a husband. There's also this other guy who is, I think he's a lawyer, who, I don't know, rocks up for some reason, and there's a bit of a thing going on there. Then there's also this detective who's on the case of these murders. So of course the two of them have a bit of a thing going on. So yeah, so there's definitely some questionable relationships going on throughout this book, and none of the characters are particularly likable, but that didn't bother me. I still enjoyed it. The stuff with the doll was just really quite entertaining. There's like a bit of a witchcraft element as well related to the doll, which I thought was cool. And this is the kind of book where you just have to not ask really any questions. You just have to like go along with it, go along for the ride and enjoy it as best you can. Because yeah, there are definitely some questions that arise, but you're not going to get answers for them, so don't even try. This one, I wouldn't say it goes quite so far as to be bonkers, but it is definitely somewhat unhinged. So yeah, if you are able to just go with it and go along for the ride, I think you would find it entertaining, as I did. I ended up giving this one a 4-star. It was maybe more of a 3.5, but it was wacky enough for me to like bump it up a little to a 4-star. Then I read Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson. This is a more recent title. This is a YA horror, and it's about a teenage girl called Mila, and her best friend dies. Everyone thinks it's suicide because there were a couple of other students at the same school that were also found dead by suicide recently. But Mila is convinced that her best friend would not have done that, and she thinks that she was murdered. So she is trying to figure out exactly what happened, who is the killer. And anyway, these two girls, Mila and her best friend Riley, were into witchcraft when they were together, and Mila decides to, yeah, do a very dark spell in order to try and get her best friend back, in order to find out exactly what happened. But in doing so, she not only raises her best friend from the dead, but she also raises these two other girls that had died recently. And these two girls were part of the popular crowd. They were basically, you know, bitchy bully types, but the 4 of them have to come together to try and figure out exactly what happened to them. Yeah, this one was really enjoyable. It had a great pacing. I liked the characters, and yeah, it just had some good humour. It had some heart as well and emotion, and it also tackled some serious topics too. And yeah, I enjoyed the witchcraft element and the friendship element, and yeah, of course there was the mystery element too, which I thought was well done. You know, there are definitely some red herrings along the way as Mila is trying to investigate, and yeah, just overall this was a really good read that I enjoyed, and yeah, I would definitely look to read more by this author. Then I picked up another vintage paperback from hell. This one is 666 by Jay Anson, and it has some, sorry for the glare, really awesome step back art. And Jay Anson also wrote the Amityville Horror, so very famous. I have read that, not a huge fan. Definitely don't think it actually happened, but yeah, regardless, I didn't think it was a particularly well written book. So yeah, I think I rated that one 3 stars. You know, it was fine, it was worth a read, but yeah, nothing mind-blowing. So I went into this one with low expectations, but I actually did enjoy this a lot more than I did the Amityville Horror. So this is about, kind of has a similar setup. We've got this house that some murders occurred in, and it seems like, yeah, there's something evil about the house that is then going to cause other people to maybe commit murder as well. But I think this one does much more justice to that idea than the Amityville Horror does. and it also doesn't claim to be real. So this one is about this house where, yeah, these murders took place, and then the house is actually, after having sat there kind of vacant for some time, and, you know, someone has gone to prison for murder, the house is uprooted and is transported to a different part of the country, and is, yeah, being put up for rent again. And we are mostly following the neighbours of that house, a husband and wife, as they, yeah, just one day this house appears near them that wasn't there before, and yeah, strange things start to happen. So yeah, I feel like the characters in this book were a bit cardboard cutout kind of thing. They weren't particularly interesting or anything, but they were fine. You know, they did the job of, you know, moving the story along. And yeah, the story was intriguing. I think it had enough of its own unique elements to make it stand out to me, and I also think it had some really great imagery as well. So yeah, there were some cool, interesting, horrific things that happen in this book that I really enjoyed, and yeah, just overall it was an entertaining read. I think it did lull a bit at some point because it kind of focuses on this other character who becomes a bit more involved in the story, which just wasn't quite as interesting to me. It got a bit drawn out at that point. But yeah, we've got this evil house, we've got this coin that randomly appears, we've got satanic rituals, and yeah, it was just a good time. This one came out in 1981, so yeah, if you like your 70s / early 80s, more of your slow burn kind of horror, then I would recommend checking this one out. I gave this one 4 stars. The next book off the stack that I picked up is Let the Old Dreams Die by John Lindqvist. If you've heard of the author's name before, it might be because of his vampire novel Let the Right One In. I remember seeing the Swedish film adaptation of that when it first came out and loved it, and that prompted me to go and read the book, which I also loved. And I did read a few of his other novels around that time, so this is going back a while. I don't think I enjoyed them nearly as much as I did Let the Right One In, and then yeah, he kind of fell off my radar for ever since, basically. And then I found this, I think, a few years ago at a library book sale, and decided to pick it up, figured I'd give it a try sometime, but I just haven't been like drawn to it. So that's why I put it on my 23 for 23, and of course then I went on to leave it for another year and pick it up right at the end. But anyway, so I did end up DNFing this one. I read the first story, which is called The Border, and I had seen the film adaptation of that, which is really good, and I did really enjoy the story as well. I thought it was excellent. And then I think I read the next 2 short stories, which I thought were good. They were okay, they weren't bad, but I didn't love them either. And this is quite a big book, and I just hadn't really been grabbed by it and wasn't really compelled to pick it up. I felt like it was dragging, and I decided I would read the final story, which is a follow-up to Let the Right One In, and then decide at that point whether I wanted to continue or not. And yeah, that story was really great too, excellent story. I really liked how he tackled a follow-up to that story, and yeah, I thought it was really, really good. I enjoyed reading it, but I think at that point I'd kind of, I don't know, had my fill. I didn't feel like I wanted to read any more of the collection. Yeah, like I say, definitely not a bad book. These aren't bad stories, the ones I read. I just wasn't really feeling it, basically. And so I decided to, yeah, I read probably like a third of the book maybe, and yeah, decided to put it down. So at this point we were getting close to the end of December and the end of the year, and while I could have gone ahead and picked up another book, one of the remaining 2 on my 23 books list, I decided to save them till January and kind of like start, you know, with a clean slate on January the 1st, and yeah, I'd fill up the last few days of December with a couple of vintage YA horror books because, you know, I love them. So I took the opportunity to pick up a point horror book that I hadn't read before. This is Amnesia by Sinclair Smith, and this is about a teenage girl who finds herself in hospital. She does not remember what happened to her, and anyway, after being there for a while, her sister appears to take her home, but she's still not remembering anything, and this girl doesn't seem super familiar, and yeah, things don't seem quite right. So yeah, she's now living in this house with this woman who is, yeah, claims to be her sister, but is she really? And she has to, yeah, try and get her memories back to figure out what happened. I thought this one was okay, you know, a bit predictable in certain ways, but it was still a somewhat enjoyable read. Yeah, it did just get a bit repetitive, I guess. So overall, I gave this one 3 stars. And then I picked up The New Year's Party by R.L. Stine. This is part of the Fear Street series. Obviously, the time of year I figured was perfect to pick this one up. And this is about a group of friends who are pranksters, just like one of my least favourite things, but R.L. Stine loves a prankster. Yeah, and anyway, they do all these stupid pranks on each other and other people, and it's not funny, it's not big, it's not clever, it's just super annoying. I kind of hated all of them. Anyway, basically, as you can probably guess, one of their pranks goes horribly wrong. Someone has possibly been killed, and then there is a chain of events that seems like maybe someone is taking revenge on the pranksters for what they did. So obviously I like the revenge bit. Gotta love a bit of revenge. But yeah, I just, the pranking and the characters were all super annoying. It did just feel a bit kind of drawn out and repetitive before things actually kind of came together and started getting a bit interesting towards the end. And I will say, the way things come together at the end are completely bonkers. I had to tell my husband about it. I was like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And he was just like, what on earth? So yeah, I would say this one is worth reading just for the absolute craziness that happens towards the end. It was quite amusing, but yeah, otherwise it was just kind of whatever, you know, it was an okay read. So while this was a bit of a mixed bag, overall it was somewhat entertaining, and I gave it 3.5 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in December. Had an okay month overall reading wise. There are a couple of videos I'm planning on doing soon that will be my top books of 2023 and also my goals, plans, etc. for 2024. So yeah, those will be 2 separate videos that will hopefully be coming up over the next couple of weeks. If you are interested in those, keep an eye out for them. Otherwise, Happy New Year. I hope January is treating you well, and thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!